You may think that I'm rather stingy with time, but the reason is that I cannot encompass all of this in a short time, and I need all of the time available. Actually, I don't expect that those of you who have not been in previous classes will be able to assimilate what has been in this class, because there has been so much and in so short a time. But the benefit of our work is this, that it is tape recorded and that it will be available for study. Now, I would like you to know this too, that I have embodied on 10 tapes the entire healing principles of the infinite way and process, if you wish to call it that, of application for the benefit of our advanced students. I would under no circumstances want these to be heard by beginners or young students, because they would not make sense. Only with a background of study of the writings is it possible for a student to understand what I have embodied on those 10 tapes. And these are two Maui Advanced Work numbers 5 and 6, Hawaiian Village Open numbers 3 and 4, and the Hawaiian Village Closed class, which has 6 tapes. And on these 10 tapes, you will find that which I'm sure is the permanent instruction and healing for the advanced student. Naturally, it is that which I am giving you in this class, and in a condensed form because of the time element. But I must at least get all of the principles into the work, and so I will repeat. When you are called upon to help anyone, your first realization must be the word God. You must realize the nature of God, so that you will not be tempted to believe that God is withholding something and you're going there and get it. Or that you may not be tempted to go to God thinking that God has it within its power to heal you or somebody else. You must always acknowledge God as that which God truly is, the divine, infinite, spiritual, perfect being which constitutes individual being, your being and mine. And then go to the next step, which is your realization that whatever the name or nature of this discord, it is an activity of the carnal mind, mortal mind. But since all that God made is good, neither carnal mind nor mortal mind nor devil ever had existence outside of the belief in two powers. You thereby impersonalize and nothingize. Now, a couple of years ago, the subject of subliminal perception was introduced to the world, and you were told how it operates. A slide is introduced into a moving picture which goes by so rapidly that you can neither see it nor hear it. Therefore, you do not know that it was there. But it entered your mind and you acted upon it. In their experiments, they suggested on this slide that you go downstairs and buy Coca-Cola and popcorn. Now, you didn't know that that slide was there. You neither saw it nor heard it. But immediately you left your seat and went downstairs and bought popcorn and Coca-Cola. And I can tell you this, that if they had said buy an automobile, you would have bought an automobile even if you couldn't afford it. Because you had to obey that which was suggested to you, and at first they proved it to be a success, and then later it was able to prove that it was a failure, but only for one reason. And that is the discovery that in the presence of spiritual law, mental law can't operate. Now, any form of error that has ever touched your life has touched your life in exactly this same way. There is a universal mesmerism, a universal suggestion, and it operates without being seen or heard, yet it enters your consciousness. Let us put it this way. The Board of Health, we will say, discovered yesterday that Saturday there will be the start of a flu epidemic in town. They don't announce it to you. They merely get prepared for it, and then Saturday morning or Sunday you wake up with the flu. In the same way, in World War I, the Americans did not wish to go to war. They re-elected a man to the presidency who had done nothing to warrant re-election. But they did have a slogan, he kept us out of war, and for that alone, they re-elected him. And then 6 months later, we were at war. And that was all accomplished in the same way. The suggestion was put out into space, and eventually, as a matter of fact, within 6 months, all those who elected him because he kept us out of war were crying, let us get into war, let us get at the Hun. That was no more your nature or your parents' nature than you wanted the last war. In this same way, every bit of evil that we act out has first been implanted in us, and most of it in a way that we are not aware of. Some of it, of course, is suggested to us. They parade certain movies and burlesque shows and musical comedy shows and have people half-dressed or undressed, and that is an appeal to our senses. And if it brings forth a sensual response, that is through an appeal directly to our senses. But the same thing could be done without our knowing it, and we would not know why it is that we had this sensual emotion, but you can be assured that somewhere in consciousness it exists. In the same way, fear comes into people's world in the morning, and they wonder why, and they wonder what they have to be afraid of, and it is this, what we can now call subliminal perception. In other words, it is a mesmeric activity or a suggestion which comes into our awareness, our consciousness, without our ever knowing it. Now, illnesses are projected that way, not consciously by anybody. Sins are projected, false appetites are projected, not consciously by anybody. It is just this mesmeric influence of the belief in two powers, good and evil. Now, both your metaphysician and your spiritual student have a way of preventing that happening in their lives. In other words, the metaphysician or the spiritual student or mystical student can separate themselves from being a statistic, being one of those who come under the averages, one of those who are influenced by these seen or unseen influences. And the way is this: if instead of blaming a person for any of the discords of life, if you will learn to impersonalize and realize that all evil has its source in this one evil, this nothingness, and that it has no power of projection because it is not God-ordained or God-sustained, you prevent its operation in your experience. I know we would all like to feel that we can save our families and our children and so forth and so on, but we can't. This has to be accepted individually in your consciousness. To some extent, your practitioner or teacher can do it for you for a while, but eventually you yourself, through a conscious activity of truth in your consciousness, separate yourself from sin, disease, death, lack, limitation, or the effects of wars or depressions. But you must do it consciously by realizing, I and my Father are one. All that the Father hath is mine. Therefore, all that emanates from God expresses itself in my experience. That which is not of God, which we may call the impersonal evil, and is not maintained or sustained by God, has no person in which, on which, or through which to operate, and thus you free yourself. Now, in your treatment, you are declaring this same truth about every individual in the world. You're not believing for a minute that this is exclusively true about you. This is a universal principle, but those who are not open and receptive and responsive to it do not benefit from your treatment. It is for this reason that in most cases, then, you influence most of all yourself and your own life, secondarily those who are closest to you. And in the case of practitioners and teachers, they absolutely become a law of harmony to their patients and their students, unless their patients and students become leaners and just look to the practitioner or teacher to keep them out of trouble forever, in which case it will not work. Now, let us understand this clearly. This room is a mass of suggestions, both good and evil. They're just floating around in space, just like radio broadcasts or television broadcasts. This room is full of them. And subconsciously you're tuned into them, and some of them have an effect upon you. Now, to become absolutely free and clear of any mesmeric influence that may be operating here, it is necessary for you to know that you and your Father, the creative principle of life, are one, and only that which emanates from the divine source can find inlet and outlet through you, and all of the mesmeric beliefs of good and evil, whatever their name and nature, have no inlet or outlet because they are of this one source, the nothingness that we have called carnal mind or mortal mind. You cannot separate yourself from sin or sinful desires or false appetites or disease or accident except through a conscious activity of your own consciousness, and it must be specific. It must understand that you are under the spiritual laws of God, and you are not under material or mental laws. You are not subject to material or mental laws because in your alignment with spiritual entity, only spiritual law can act in you, on you, and through you. All else is carnal mind or nothingness. If you like, you can use my very favorite example. It is one that exemplifies this whole principle to me. That is of the Hebrew prophet whose people came to him and said, the enemy is coming at us, and they are more than we are. They outnumber us greatly. They have great weapons. The Hebrew prophet said, they have only the arm of flesh. We have the Lord God Almighty. In other words, he acknowledged, he didn't do like many metaphysicians do, go around denying error, denying evil. He didn't deny that they had men, equipment, weapons. He merely said they have temporal weapons. They have temporal arms, the arm of flesh. We have the Lord God Almighty. Now I say to you that that is the principle of the infinite way, that there is evil in this world. That is why we are truth students. That's why we've been driven to find a way to rise above the evils of what Jesus called this world. But what we have discovered is that these evils represent the arm of flesh, or temporal power, which in the presence of God is not power. Now do not misunderstand this message of the infinite way. It does not use truth over error. It does not call upon God to do something to evil. It does not acknowledge a great, great power that we have which will do something to other powers. This teaching of the infinite way stands foursquare on the truth. God is the only power. All else, whether you call it material power or mental power, is temporal power, impersonal power, or nothingness. That is the story of David and Goliath. That is the story of Jesus Christ standing before Pilate. I have power to crucify you or set you free. Thou couldst have no power over me unless it were given thee of God. The crippled man, what did hinder you? He didn't turn to God and say, heal this crippled man. He said, what did hinder you? In other words, what power is there other than God's power? He didn't call on God to open the eyes of the blind. He just said, open your eyes. What power is there to keep them closed? His entire teaching in the Sermon on the Mount is, resist not evil. That's the whole teaching. Why should you not resist evil? Because it isn't power. It is only a suggestion or a temptation which you don't have to accept. It comes to you as a suggestion of good and evil, health or sickness. It comes to you as a suggestion of power, but you don't have to accept it. You do not have to accept the Adam and Eve fall, which came about because they believed in good and evil, two powers. You can revert to your spiritual selfhood and accept God as the all in all of being, then look upon material forces or mental forces as the arm of flesh, temporal power, or nothingness. But you must be careful. If you ever personalize, if you ever blame a person for anything, you're setting the trap into which you will eventually fall. If you blame Khrushchev for your troubles, if you blame union leaders for your troubles, if you blame politicians or politics for your troubles, you are setting the trap for yourself. It is true that many of these are instruments for evil, but those aren't the evils, and they couldn't operate in the presence of your consciousness of one power. I would like to illustrate for you for a moment. We had the occasion 3 times when we were given warning in Hawaii of the approach of tidal waves, hurricanes. We were told the exact spot and the exact hour when it would strike. And a group of us, Infinite Way students, decided to see if weather wasn't actually an activity of the carnal mind. That is, such weather, destructive weather, because to me it has always been clear that any manifestation of evil force is an activity of this carnal mind, and therefore is nothingness and can be proven so. But actually I didn't have the occasion, or probably the time, for this particular experiment until this particular time, and while I can't go into the beautiful long story, I can tell you this, that on all 3 occasions the storm dissipated itself before it struck. And in the last instance, even the head of the Coast Guard acknowledged that a miracle had taken place, because the storm was actually lost 15 minutes before it was due to strike. Now, we proved beyond all doubt that such material manifestations as destructive weather can be included in the activity of the carnal mind, therefore temporal power, or the arm of flesh, or no power, and in the presence of that realization, it dissolves. It doesn't go somewhere and hurt somebody else, it dissolves. Now, many years ago, when the realization first came to me that spiritual healing of individuals was only a side issue in the message of the Infinite Way, I realized that actually within 25 years there won't be need for any metaphysical teaching or spiritual teaching so far as healing is concerned, because materia medica is gradually wiping out disease, and by that time probably we'll have it all wiped out. And as I told you, our Masonic bodies in New York have discovered the secret of longevity and are now teaching it to the medical profession, and they promise that the present generation will live in good health to 100, and within 2 generations to 150. So you see, we are going to be no longer needed so far as healings, physical or mental healings, are concerned. But that doesn't mean that we are going to be outmoded, because our principal function in life is going to be to establish spiritual life and spiritual law on earth, spiritual harmony. Therefore, it was necessary that we find wider fields. Well, now, it is about 8 or 9 years ago that I was first called to a management labor strike, and after it was discovered that they could not settle it and they asked for my help, the strike ended within 24 hours. Since that time, I have more or less been continuously active in capital and labor works, and have a complete 100% record of harmony, no failures. And gradually our work is expanding into wider and wider activities of that nature, in which we are proving that evil is not personal. It is never the fault of the union head or the corporation head. It is never the fault of the board of directors. It is never the fault of labor leaders. Never. It is always that the carnal mind, operating through love of power, mad ambition, so forth, brings about these troubles. But when one individual realizes the impersonal nature of the evil, it can't operate anymore. You might say, why don't you stop all the strikes in the world? You have to have an inlet. In other words, if you are not called by the labor side or the capital side, you just cannot get inside. In every case in which I've worked, I've been called in either by the union side or the capital side. We've never had a failure. But the operation is always the same. I am not on the side of labor. I am not on the side of unions. And most definitely I'm not on the side of much that goes on in capitalism. Although I am a rank capitalist by profession, a 100% capitalist. Without capital, but a capitalist. But not in any sense that can bring limitation or evil to anyone. My sense of capitalism on the human scale envisions the time when every employee of every firm will be a partner in it, a stockholder in it, and there will be no need then for these external unions. There will only be internal unions made up of the workers within each industry. Now, I say this to you, that you must approach every problem, and while it may be some time before you have problems of that nature, you will almost from the beginning have problems of human relationships. You will have marital problems brought to you, parent and child problems brought to you, neighbor and neighbor problems brought to you, and you will solve every one of them on this basis. Be sure that you don't believe the wife when she tells you how terrible her husband is, and more especially don't believe the husband when he speaks about his wife. They're both lying because they're speaking from their personal interests. Don't believe them. Whatever it is of an evil nature that has entered the relationship is impersonal. And the moment you impersonalize it, you destroy it. And the first thing you know, they find they have something in common again. So it is in our dealings with children. So it is in our dealings with employer and employee. So it is in our dealings with all human relationships. Be careful that you do not personalize. When you impersonalize, then you destroy it. Now, to those of you who may have at some time or other been taught to fear the evil thoughts of other people, or the malpractice of people or groups of people, please be assured of this, that the only power it has is what you give it. The moment that you impersonalize malpractice, you heal it or remove it. As long as you attach it to a person or to a condition, you destroy yourself. There too, I've had the pleasure and the privilege of many opportunities of working with students, not Infinite Way students, with others who have come under psychic influence from the other side and are being handled by erroneous entities or erroneous powers, and their entire lives are being manipulated and made miserable. And in every case, the healing has come about through impersonalization. In other words, not trying to destroy the evil entity, not trying to remove that person or personality involved, but by separating the evil power from all person and personality, placing it back in the carnal mind, and then nothingizing it in the realization that it has no law of God, it has no spiritual law to maintain it or sustain it. Every evil that you come in contact with will either appear as a person, a thing, or a condition. Therefore, learn to impersonalize, and you will heal. Your healings will be miraculous, but only in proportion to your ability to impersonalize and nothingize, because it is not your patient who is responsible for his ills, nor is it anybody else. It is not your patient who is responsible for his nature or character or lack of it. It is only their ignorance of how to separate themselves from these impersonal or devilish influences which come to us as temptations or suggestions, but which in and of themselves are nothing until we accept them, believe them, and then live them. Now, you can see then that spiritual healing has its foundation in God, but not going to God for the healing, not turning to God for the healing, not expecting God to do anything. It has its foundation in God because of your understanding of the true nature of God, that which never gives and never withholds, but is forever being and harmoniously being. And then your recognition of the fact that anything and everything of an unlike God nature belongs to that category of devil, Satan, carnal mind, mortal mind, which is temporal power or nothingness. Now, remember this. You will come up against, in active practice, specific conditions which you will have to learn how to handle in this impersonal way, such as infection and contagion. Always there are flu epidemics and polio epidemics and other epidemics. You will always have to learn that these are not conditions of germs or matter, nor are they conditions of weather. These are projections of carnal mind. No power, temporal power, the arm of flesh. The moment you try to handle them as germs or infection or contagion, you will not succeed, because you will be on the materia medica level. They work with germs, infection, and contagion, but you can't. You can only work from the spiritual level, and that level knows the nothingness of what appears as destructive germs. We don't deny germs. I suppose in our human experience we couldn't live without them. We can deny the destructive nature of them, because God never empowered anything of a destructive nature to destroy God's own creation. You will come up against infection and contagion. You will come up against hereditary diseases and beliefs. You'll handle them in the same way. God is our only Father, and God is our only Mother. We were not born of the flesh. That which is called our human birth is only a mode of expression. It isn't creation. Creation begins back long before the original seed. That's where creation begins. Therefore, it has to begin in the invisible, and it has to have its origin in God. Therefore, God becomes the creative principle of all life. Therefore, God, and it's probably why Jesus thought of God as Father, God is the creative principle of all life, and therefore God is our only parent, and it is only from God that our qualities and nature can flow. Then what of these evil qualities in nature? They belong to that carnal mind which is no mind, and thereby are nullified. As long as you plant them in man, as long as you blame it on his mother and father, you're personalizing. So you have to remove inherited traits from the parents and the grandparents and the great-grandparents. You have to stop believing that this person is this way because they have Jewish traits, and this one has Irish traits, and this one has Negro traits. You have to stop that if you hope to be successful in your work, because these traits, which are racial or national or religious, all belong to the same source. They emanate from the carnal mind, and they're not power, they're not presence, they're not substance, they're not law, and you nullify them. So you are going to find that what I have said to you here in 2 hours this morning is going to take you 2 years to understand and apply. Those of you who have not been working with the principles of impersonalization and nothingizing, because some of the evils will appear to you in forms that you won't recognize, and you'll forget immediately that this too has to go back into the carnal mind where it can be nothingized. You see, it's always some person who's doing something to us, and it's hard for us to get away from blaming that person. Now, a couple of questions here. What is meant by taking the body with you when you pass on? Actually, if that's understood, it means this: that consciousness couldn't be consciousness unless it had form. It has to be embodied, and therefore you are never separated from body. It is true that you leave a physical body for burial or cremation, but actually it isn't a body you are leaving so much as it is a concept of what body is. However, the main point to remember is this: you'll never be without a body. Even if you should rise into the mystical part of the work and actually learn how to travel this world without an airplane, you will still find that you are embodied. And the answer is that you are not now in a body. If surgery could examine you from the topmost hair to your toenail, it would never find you, for you aren't there. You aren't in the body at all. And you never were, and you never can be. You exist separate and apart from this body, but you are using this body as an instrument. The Master said he could lay it down or pick it up, and there are many others who can do the same thing. The day will come, perhaps, when it will be necessary for you to lay down this body because you will be ready for another experience. But in laying it down, it doesn't mean that you'll be bodiless. It merely means that you will have, through your consciousness, built for yourself another body. It is, for instance, like those who have come to the United States from the ghettos of foreign countries. They come here, and some of them embody themselves in ghettos over here. But as their consciousness grows, improves, expands, they outgrow the ghettos in which they live. And eventually you find them living in palaces and country places and so forth and so on. In other words, their consciousness has built for them a better country to live in, a better neighborhood to live in, a better financial circumstance. It was their consciousness that did it. Their relatives may still be in that ghetto back in the foreign country. It is always individual consciousness that performs the miracles of your life. Now, if we are not satisfied with our present place in life, our consciousness will build a new place for us by enriching itself with spiritual truth. As consciousness is enriched with spiritual truth, the body improves. Our physical body, our mental body, our mind as well as our body, and our homes and our bank accounts, all of these expand as consciousness is imbued with spiritual truth. Do you think that those on other planets do contact us? Actually, I know nothing about other planets. I can tell you this. Since God is infinite, God must express itself infinitely, and therefore there is no place where God is not. That means there is no place where life is not. But I know not what the forms of life may be. I do know that there have been continents on which at some time or other there was no human life. And then, just as like on our continent, there was human life in the form of the Redskins, gradually this life and its forms have changed, and we are here. Therefore, it is possible that the forms of life on other planets may be what our forms are, may be other. I know nothing of this. I'm only sure of one thing, and that is that since there is no place where God is not, there is no place where life is not. What form of life that may be, I do not know, or whether or not they are communicating. Again, I must repeat to you that in my teaching you will find nothing except that which I myself have experienced. I cannot give you the teachings of others. I cannot give you the experiences of others, because the infinite way is only the externalization or presentation of what I myself have experienced in the 13 years of study and 30 years of spiritual unfoldment. And I have not had any communication from anyone on any other planet. If I have, they haven't identified themselves. Now I want to tell you this, that the soul or the life of an individual never dies, nor does it lose its attained development. Therefore, Jesus Christ, who left this experience in full illumination, still exists and lives. And he doesn't live in any place he lives in and as consciousness. And since consciousness is infinite, he lives and exists in my consciousness, and it is within my power to receive light and instruction from that consciousness which is and forever has been and forever will be Jesus Christ. I will say to you that Gautama the Buddha, who left this plane in full illumination, still lives, still teaches, still performs his mighty works, and it is all being done in consciousness. And that means your consciousness and my consciousness. And therefore we are being illumined, instructed by that state of consciousness. And so we could go on and name all of those who attained illumination and left this plane fully illumined, and they are here where we are. They are sitting at this table, and they are facing me through your consciousness. And if you have not yet been aware of the fact that all spiritual light is embodied within your consciousness, know it now. The kingdom of God, of allness, is within you, and you are instructed of God. If at this moment it appears to be coming through me, that is only a temporary situation, just like when it came through Jesus Christ, it was a 3-year experience on earth. Jesus left this plane, but spiritual illumination continued because it remained in individual consciousness. And as I pass from this experience, spiritual illumination will continue within you and within others, and throughout all ages, spiritual teachers, revelators, leaders will appear on earth to speak the language of that day. Never forget that. We have had need of every mental and spiritual teaching that has appeared on earth, because each has been a stepping stone to where we are in the infinite way. And it is an essential thing at this time only because it will prepare consciousness for the day when no one will have to think in terms of, oh, that's carnal mind, because there won't even be a temptation of a carnal mind there. That is the state of mysticism. That is when an individual no longer has to impersonalize, because in his experience it is like that of the experience of God. There is no evil to behold. But that's the mystical estate. And it is from that state of consciousness that our mystical literature and our mystics have come forth into experience. Now, when a mystic appears, one of two things takes place. He is either led to retire from the world and there ponder the truths of mysticism and be an influence through which they permeate human consciousness, or he is given a work to do in the world. Whichever way it is, he must be obedient and follow it. You are preparing yourself for the experience in proportion as you learn to impersonalize. because you are training yourself to a state of mind in which evil has no reality, no power, no law, no person, no cause. When you come to that place, you have that mind which was also in Christ Jesus, because then it looks right at Pilate and it says, thou hast no power. It looks at the cripple and says, what did hinder you? It says to the blind man, open the eyes. Because in that state of consciousness, there are no opposing powers. Well, this will have to be left for tomorrow. I want to, for this final few minutes, take you to another elevation of consciousness. I want you now to close your eyes and say the word I. No, to yourself. This is all going to take place within you. And now, remember, or state it if you like, I have feet. I have limbs. I have a body. I have eyes. I have ears. I have sight. I have hearing. I have intelligence. I have discernment. I have love. I have gratitude. I have integrity. I have life. I have a mind. I have thoughts. Now, just think of what you've just said. There is something which is called I, which constitutes your being. You may call it I, Joel, or I, Mary, I, Bill. This I, which you have just declared, is you. It is that which constitutes you, and it possesses a mind, and it possesses a body, it possesses life, it possesses intelligence. Therefore, this I, which I am, is above life, mind, intelligence, body. It is something greater than all these, because it possesses all these, it uses all these, it is aware of all these. This I, which I am, is greater than my mind, therefore I have dominion over my thoughts. This I, which I am, is greater than my body, therefore I have dominion over my health. This I, which I am, has dominion over every facet of my life. God gave me that dominion in the beginning. Therefore, neither material conditions nor mental beliefs, theories, have power or jurisdiction over me. Neither the physical forces of man nor the mental powers of man have jurisdiction or government or control over me. For I and my Father are one, and all that the Father hath is mine, all the dominion, all the power, and all the glory, and therefore the suggestions of this world, that which Jesus called this world, its physical or mental suggestions, come to me, but findeth nothing in me, and have no jurisdiction over me, for I and my Father are one. I and my Father are one. I and the infinite source are one, and all that the Father hath is mine. Now, neither the material forces or powers, nor the mental theories or beliefs have power, place, jurisdiction, government, or control in my experience, for I now assume the dominion given to me in the beginning by God through the word I. Now bear witness with this. I will never leave you nor forsake you. I will be with you even if you fall into the waters. You will not drown, for I will be with you. You've just declared that I. If the flames kindle upon you, they will not burn, for I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. I will be with thee unto the end of the world. If you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will be with you. Now, please remember this. All of the power of the Godhead is embodied in that I which you have just declared. God has given its power unto the individual I, which I am. Therefore, every time that you silently and secretly and sacredly voice the word I, you are speaking of the Son of God, which has its home in heaven and which has complete dominion over everything in the earth and the waters and in the air and in the skies above the earth. This I which you have declared, which is in the midst of you, is the Christ or the Son of God. It is the spiritual presence and power. If you desecrate yourself, it is you who are doing it, and you can stop it. If you are accepting fear, hate, envy, jealousy, malice, greed, lust, false ambition, you can stop it, because I, which is the I of you, is Christhood. And it itself is the power of healing within you. When Jesus said that I am ordained to heal the sick, he was talking about the I of your being. That I within you is ordained to heal the sick, your own sick body. It is ordained to restore the lost years of the locust. It is ordained to create a new body for you in the image of God. This I you must treat as something sacred, secret. You must not divulge it to your family, to your friends, to your neighbors, to your church members. Each individual must hold within himself and herself sacredly the secret of their own true identity, and they must never reveal it outwardly or openly, although in knowing the truth about others, this is the truth you're knowing about them. The only time that you will be permitted to reveal this to anyone is when you are a teacher and your student has given evidence in some way or other that they desire to know the secret of life, which is the secret of their identity. I give this to you because by your study of the writings, by your having traveled miles and miles and miles, by your having been willing to spend time, effort, money, you have indicated that you are seeking God, which means seeking truth, which means seeking the secret of life eternal. It is for this reason that you have demonstrated to me that you are not here for loaves and fishes, even though you will have plenty of these,